there's a world out there trying to tell you who you are, and there's a world in here that's trying to tell you who you are. And you have to tell yourself who you are. Because the world outside is very noisy and very tempting, and it has all the razzmatazz, has all the tinsel and all the glitter. But that's because you don't think you're enough in the first place. In the end, you have to leave yourself to understand the value of yourself. And then you have to face the demons that you've created in your history by facing them and fighting them and owning them. You put them in the face of who you are. That is the essence of all stories.
In the legend of King Arthur, the story begins with Arthur's father, King Uther Pendragon, being killed, along with his mother, the Queen, when Arthur's only still a baby. Arthur escapes, but he pays a huge price. He grows up not knowing who he really is. He doesn't know about his royal bloodline, the fact that he's actually the son of the king and rightful heir to the throne. Years go by as he makes his way into the world. He lives an ordinary life, and there's a part of him that wonders if he's meant for something more. He doesn't know it yet, but his life is about to completely change forever. This is the sword, Excalibur, a mythical weapon of incredible power. According to legend, only the rightful king can pull the sword from the stone. Many have tried. All have failed. That is, until Arthur comes along. But he doubts himself. He hesitates, thinking, who am I to try to lift this sword? He grips the handle. He pulls, and it lifts from the stone. This is his birthright. This is the same sword his father held, and it's exactly what he'll need to take the throne and become king. But life is never so easy. The sword has great power, but he doesn't yet know how to control it. Its secrets don't reveal themselves right away. He has to learn to master it. And if this is hard, it's only just the beginning. Whether he's ready or not, this is the start of a dangerous journey. And very soon, he will face the toughest challenges of his life. Treacherous enemies, powerful demons, the great shadow. And as he moves forward on his path, Arthur has second thoughts. He begins to wonder, maybe this is all too much for me. Can I really do this? I didn't ask for any of this. In his darkest moment, he throws the sword away. The only thing he wants is to go back to the simple life he's left behind. That uncomplicated time before everything changed. But fate would intervene once more. This is the Lady of the Lake, a mysterious and supernatural being who lives beneath its waters. She shows him a vision, a glimpse of his future. This is what will happen if he refuses the sword. It's a dark future, visions of untold suffering and tragedy. It's only now that Arthur realizes that he's the only one who can stop it from happening. It's up to him to make a different future. And it's here, with a renewed sense of purpose, that he retakes his sword. He finds his allies, and together they fight to reclaim the throne. There are many versions of this legend, and even on a literal level, it's a powerful story, but it's still just a surface-level understanding, because on a more symbolic level, this is also the story of your journey, the story of your own personal legend in hero's journey. The idea of the divine right of rulers in early Europe is based on the idea that royal authority came directly from God, and so if a king or queen was the rightful ruler, no one could take that away. It's for this reason that even after Arthur forgets about his royal lineage, the throne is still rightfully his to claim. The metaphor is that you too have something that's rightfully yours to claim, something that no one can take away. It's your divine nature. In much the same way that Arthur forgets about his royal bloodline, when we're born into this world, we too forget that we're divine beings. This happens because the world is desperate to tell you who you are. And if you don't push against it, if you don't define who you are for yourself, you will be overwhelmed by the forces that tell you you're powerless. Filmmaker Guy Ritchie explains the symbolic meaning behind the sword and the stone.
The significance of the extraction from the sword from the stone is the stone is the material world. The material world which seems all solid because it controls you whilst you're projecting your sense of identity upon it. The extraction of the stone is taking back your own authority, your own divinity, your own authority, your own identity, whatever it is that you've got to call it, your own power. You're no longer looking for a sense of self outside of yourself. That is the story of King Arthur. But it's not just the story of King Arthur, it's the story of all narrative.
So the stone is a kind of false self that we build around us. It's all the things that we believe about what others tell us, about who we are. But buried deep within the stone is your sword, your true authentic self, the divine power that you alone can tap into, that you alone can wield. In the moment you choose to pull your sword from the stone, it's the realization that you are the master of your fate, that you're given this life to enact a very special kind of journey. This isn't a new idea. In fact, the American writer and professor Joseph Campbell studied the Arthurian legends along with many myths and religions from around the world. In his book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, he describes countless stories told in many different cultures and at different times in history. What he finds is that they're amazingly similar. Influenced by the work of psychologist Carl Jung and his theory of archetypes in the collective unconscious, Campbell found that behind all these stories, there was in fact only one basic story, the monomyth he called the hero's journey. You see it in almost every movie ever made. It's the story we keep retelling over and over again, because it's not just a pattern we find in myth and legend. It reflects something deeply universal about the truth of our lives. These myths resonate because, as Jung points out, myths are first and foremost psychic phenomena that reveal the nature of the soul. So what exactly is the hero's journey? Campbell describes 17 different stages, but not every journey will have all 17 of them. And the journey itself is a circle, which tells us that there isn't really a definite end to the story. When we think we've reached the end, we actually end up back where we began. And the process begins again with a new journey. You can think of the hero's journey as a kind of psychological roadmap for the unfolding of your life. When you understand the stages of the journey, you can use it to guide you through crisis and all the challenges you'll face along the way. At the heart of it, the hero's journey is about going into the darkness, confronting your worst demons, and coming back into the light. It's about moving from an unsatisfying life to one of meaning and fulfillment by pushing through the darkest and scariest things you can imagine. And it's only through this process that we learn to transcend our limits. Campbell's 17 stages have been grouped and described in many different ways. In this video, we'll look at them as 5 main overarching stages. The story starts with you, living an ordinary and mundane life. You might be content, but beneath the surface, it feels intuitively like something's missing. Until life brings an unexpected event. It shakes up your whole world in an uncomfortable way. This is the call to adventure, and in many cases, it's unpleasant. But it's often the things that we never want to happen that are exactly what we need to push us to grow into the next stage of our lives. You can try to ignore the call, and many heroes do at first, but if you keep refusing, it only grows louder and louder. One of the most common ways we see this is through something Carl Jung called synchronicity. It's a meaningful coincidence where an inner state of mind lines up with an event in the outside world. Like when you tell someone your dream about a beetle, and at exactly that moment, a beetle flies into the room. He noticed in his patients that when they were going through a major life crisis, they would experience more synchronicities. Why? Jung wrote that we all have access to an unconscious mind made up of shared concepts, images, and ancestral memory that's universal. He called it the collective unconscious, which we looked at in this video. And within the collective unconscious, we find primal symbols and images called archetypes, like the Great Mother, the Trickster, and of course the hero. We find them in every society and in every culture in the world. What's common to all these stories is that what makes someone a hero isn't necessarily superhuman strength or rescuing people from dramatic situations. Being a hero happens when you make the choice to answer the call to adventure in your life. You're a hero when you consciously choose to face your own demons, whether it's depression or the end of a relationship or the loss of a loved one. It takes courage and strength to face these things and to rebuild your life from the ground up. In every person, there's a seed of potential waiting to be awakened. The archetype of the hero is something you can tap into because it already exists within you. It always has. Campbell describes an important part of accepting the call to adventure in his famous words, "Follow your bliss." Following your bliss means having the courage to look inside yourself and ask, what am I really here to do? What am I truly passionate about? What fills my soul with joy and makes me feel truly alive? Asking these questions can lead you to discover your greatest gifts. And if you do this, if you listen to your intuition, you will experience more synchronicity in your life. Campbell writes that when you follow your bliss, the universe will open doors where there were only walls. He calls it a feeling of being helped by hidden hands, where new doors open up to you, where they wouldn't have opened for anyone else. There's a common misconception that following your bliss means chasing pleasure through a kind of mindless hedonism, but that's not what Campbell is talking about. What it's about is finding an inner sense of meaning and fulfillment, finding the spark that feeds your soul. This is the beginning of bringing about your personal legend. In Arthurian legend, King Arthur and his knights see a vision of the Holy Grail. This is the priceless gift that can restore the world. They go off on a quest to find it and make their way into the dark forest. Each knight has to enter that forest at exactly the point where it's darkest for them. Their fear is exactly what tells them where to go, and they each have to find their own entry into that darkness. There's no other path and no one to follow, and once they've crossed it, there's no turning back. The Holy Grail in the story is a symbol for the realization of the self and becoming the best version of who you are, what Carl Jung described in the process of individuation, which is where we learn to bring together and integrate the different parts of the psyche, making the unconscious conscious so we can become more whole. To do this, you have to face the darkest parts of who you are, the place you're most afraid to go, and it's exactly at that point that you must go alone. Part of us wants to turn back, but much like the Lady of the Lake's warning to Arthur, Campbell warns us about the dangers of refusing the journey, of giving in to despair and ignoring your inner voice. If you become a slave to your fear, that seed of great potential within you will remain hidden, and that will become your cage. You have to leave your old self behind before you can forge a new one. After you've crossed the threshold, you now have to survive and overcome a series of trials, some of the most difficult challenges of your life. You will face the darkest and most terrifying things you've ever seen. And this is why so few people go on the journey. Fear. In our myths and legends, this is often symbolized by a great dragon. And in Jungian psychology, it's confronting your own shadow, the darkest parts of yourself where you least want to look. And if you don't explore it, it remains unconscious. In the legend of King Arthur, as he learns to use the sword, it becomes clear that he's really learning to master himself. It's the sword that helps him confront his past, to conquer his demons, and face the things he's tried all his life to forget. Only then can it be brought to the surface. There's one certainty in this world, and that is, sooner or later, you will experience loss in your life. It can be tremendous loss. People leave us, or we lose our livelihood, or our health. Our world shattered, and what once felt so solid and reliable falls away before our eyes. Joseph Campbell called it the dark night of the soul, and it's something everyone has to face. It's also the hardest thing we ever face. You may wonder if it's worth it to go on, and in that moment, it feels like it will break you, but it won't. In our myths and stories, there's almost always a mentor, a guardian who guides us on our way, but perishes before we finish our journey. In Arthurian legend, Arthur's father dies before he ever sees his son become king. This is indescribably painful, but it's the way of the world. One king passes on, so another can take the throne. Nothing in nature can bloom forever. And there comes a moment in our lives where our parents pass on, the previous generation leaves us, and now it's up to us. In every hero's journey, there's a moment of death. Campbell talks about a symbolic death where something must die so something new can emerge. Because tragedy is what reveals the divine strength within you, strength you didn't even know you had. And this will enable you to expand into the person you were destined to become. And for all these reasons, we must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned so as to have the life that's waiting for us. We think of time as a straight line, but as we've seen, the hero's journey is a circle. To come to the end of the journey means going back to the beginning. But even after you've returned, things will never be the same again, because now you're completely reborn. When you face your demons and conquer them, you unlock a piece of your personal legend, because the best and most rewarding moments of your life will come to you only after a struggle. And those gifts that you gain, the wisdom, the experience, and the perspective couldn't have come to you without going on the journey. The universe has placed all of life's richest rewards on the other side of your fear. And by necessity means doing the things you've never done, to face the things you've never faced, and venturing into the unknown. The return marks the moment you share the lessons and gifts you've learned with the world, because you've gone into the belly of the beast. You've faced the most terrifying demons you can imagine, and here you are, still standing. In an important sense, every new day brings with it a new call to adventure. It's the man who quietly recovers from addiction, the woman who learns to forgive herself for things that aren't her fault. It's the search for redemption. Our lives are a blink in time, and whichever way it unfolds, your experience adds to the collective wisdom and raises our collective consciousness. From all the people who came before you, and all the people who will be transformed because you lived and had the courage to follow your personal legend. I'd love to know, have you faced your own dark night of the soul and come back to tell the tale? I'd love to hear your story in the comments, and it'd be wonderful if you left a comment with a sword emoji. That way I know how many people made it to the end. If you like this video, I think you'll like either of these videos, which also explore the hero's journey. And if you liked it, please show your support by pressing the like button. As always, thanks so much for watching, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.